get courted emotionally, it is a totally different matter. For some reason, maybe because of the primitivism of the human being emotionally, these hooks are very, very deep. You've got to imagine them like, real big, fisherman's hooks, something pretty like anchors that go right into your soul.
Very
right
barbed.
Into the vessels, right into the blood, right into the bone. And so, boy, oh boy, trying to take those out again is very, very hard, if not impossible. And then the problem is that even when you've taken them out, the wounds take a long time to heal, even though the hooks may be out. So this is where the situation is, that, when you've realized, it can be too late, because the person who's normally vampirizing you usually doesn't present themselves as an enemy. That's not the way the vampire works. The enemy, doing that will be no good, because then your defenses are up. They will act like the most charming, wonderful, graceful and brilliant person, etc., and then they will make you get courted to them. This is the very severe ones will do this. They will violate your sovereignty. They'll violate your sexual and emotional and spiritual sovereignty. And therefore, you're more likely that you'll be, emotionally courted to these people. And therefore, it's very difficult to make the break, because we project our own virtue on other people. Which means that we often, when we meet people, if you're good, you project your own goodness on them, you project your own goodness on the world, and you expect everyone to act and be who like you are. And it comes as a mighty big shock when you realize that people are not even remotely like what you are. They're not even remotely like what you think they are, because you have an idea in your head that needs to go. Now, that's very hard for people to swallow, because it goes against the grain, and I call it the Hamlet complex. Hamlet was so pure and so moral, so openly moral, so visibly moral, that number one, he was the victim of tremendous violence from the people around him, and more so, he was in a state of absolute torpor, complete and utter depression and malcontentedness, to even realize that people were immoral. So this is the question. It has to do with how much light you've got, is how much worse vampirism is going to happen to you. It's a strange paradox.
And again, that's why it's so important to know thyself, because that's your biggest and best defense. Yeah,
even though that might sound very bizarre to most people, and if you have a predicament going on in your life, that can seem like the worst kind of advice. In fact, it's the best advice. The whole thing is become initiated because the person did not know themselves.
Yeah.
This is how I got into the subject. I come from the spiritual community, and it was through it was through the discoveries of metaphysics and knowing thyself that I came across this pernicious disease, because in my work, it's not so much about finding out how to, develop towards the light. I believe that people already have a tremendous instinct for doing that. I always say this in my work. I think that the problem is not that people lack the passion or the motivation or the inclination to go towards the truth. I think that a lot of people have. I think the reason why we're not there is because we're not addressing those forces that keep us from that. We've lost our catabolic thinking. We've lost our deconstructive model, in which you have to remove the violence, the toxicity, and the filth, and the error in order to move forward naturally. What we've done is we've forgotten about that and say, oh no, but I'll just pay this person, or I'll just give this person my allegiance, or I'll just follow this technique or this spiritual path, and that will help me. But, that's just trying to pull yourself up by the bootstraps. You don't need any of that stuff. You will already automatically move of your own nature towards your own satori, towards your own nirvana, without anybody else's say-so or help. It's just that you're attached. It's the famous old, story of what the Eastern mystics used to say is attachment, attachment, attachment. But what did they really mean by that? You see, and I'm hoping that my work will give the Western people a much better understanding of what it's meant when they say that, you have to let go of your attachment. People have a very vague understanding about what that means. What they're really talking about is emotional attachments, a particular kind of courting, a particular kind of neediness that's very primal, and it's very, very deeply inside human beings towards one another. And it's a violation. Now, we might call it relationship, and we might give it the term love, because that's easy to do. It's very easy for somebody to cover their psychic violence in the name relationship. If you're not dealing with a human as a human, but you're dealing with them as a role, because that person is your child, your slave, or your husband, or your mother. These are all roles, and they have no meaning spiritually whatsoever. Most of these relationships are not based on people dealing with another person as a human, respectfully, and responding to their sovereignty and to their spirituality. You never see that. what you see are various forms of violence, various forms of enslavement, under the name of family, you see, under the name of government. Look what's happening right now in America. Psychic vampires are all the way up to the White House.
Yeah, and beyond.
And we put them there. I say this in my other work. But the condition is within everybody. You can have a person in your family that's more of a tyrant to you than anybody in Capitol Hill. You've got to deal with the individuals that are psychically, erasing your spiritual quest, holding you back from your light, right in your midst, if you can hope to do anything tomorrow, on a larger scale.
Wow, we're going to take our next break here now. I tell you, the time just goes by so quickly. It's just amazing. And when we come back, I want to ask you a question to kind of bring us into the next segment. And the question will be, what's the difference between a creative man and a destructive man?
Okay.
But for now, here is Jethro Tull in War Child. Enjoy. We're sitting here talking with Michael Tsarion, and right now, once again, about psychic vampirism. And before we left to break there, Michael, I wanted to ask the question, what is the difference between a creative man and a destructive man?
That's a supreme question, a very important question. It goes to and it's very important to ask these kinds of questions because there are different kinds of human beings walking around in the earth. And, again, as I was saying, using our reason to not only be able to monitor ourselves, but to, be able to judge other people is very, very important. In the New Age movement, there's this whole cult of thou shall not judge, and all of this malarkey, and I'm very, very much against that. I believe that judgment and criticalness are aspects of the reason, and that we're living in an age, that is very, very down on things that, we need to be using every single day. I mean, we use them every day at the counter. We use them every day when we're doing normal things, when you're going to buy something. And yet, when it comes to the most critical moments of our life, when we're just about to make these critical emotional accordings, we suddenly throw them out the door and believe that, just accept what the mask that they play. And we hurt ourselves by doing that. We actually violate our own judgment. We violate our own intuition when we do this. So there is a need to observe the differences in people and to sharpen the attributes of the reason. Otherwise, we're going to be wide open to attack. But getting specifically to your question, it really boils down to Arno Gruen is a psychologist that I think summed it up perfectly, in which he talked about the difference between the outer-directed and the inner-directed person. This is a psychologist called Arno Gruen, and he's sort of a Freudian who wrote on the betrayal of the self, and he wrote about how it has come that man has basically become a robot, an automaton, a person who just follows the handrails that are provided by the system, by the society, and goes along and performs these roles. And what the psychologists are saying, the Freudians and the post-Freudians are saying, is that, look, most people that you see are actually, George, not even human in the fully sense of the word. They're deeply sick, deeply ill people who will end up on a psychiatrist's bench if they can afford it, or on medication if they can't. We're dealing with a culture of people who have lost their soul. Yeah. And Jung also talked about this, Carl Jung. And the psychosis or the pathology is rooted in this ubiquitous extroversion that you see in the world. So you take the extrovert person. That person is not going to look deranged or psychopathic because they may apparently be creative. It's like people in music. They can be drug fiends. They can be womanizers. They can be the most debauched of people, but they can get on stage and play great music.
Yeah.
So to all intents and purposes, they appear to be quite normal, and even people might envy those kind of people. So, but they're outer-directed. Outer-directed means that you're waiting for the world to turn you on. You are absolutely empty within, but you are a good mimic, and you're a brilliant performer. So most people that you see around the world, they don't actually have a soul at all, because there's a fundamental rule that people need to understand. And what we're talking about, they can go to my website, Psychic Vampirism, and they can read that quote that you started the show with, and they can get into this a little bit more if they want to. And on the blog, if they go to michaeltsarion.com, they'll be able to go through the blog and read up on this so they can